Hey, welcome to the channel. Are you dealing with medial elbow pain? Now look, this is something that affects really active people that are always trying to do the right thing, and it can be incredibly frustrating. So today I'm going to go over in this video why you likely developed it and some simple things that you can do from stretching and rehabilitation as well as strengthening that actually work. So if you're ready, let's go. Hi, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Coach Victor Robledo. If this is your first time here, I've been a strength and conditioning coach and an injury rehab specialist for the last 30 years. And so I have in the trenches experience with the majority of injuries, the majority of strength and conditioning with a wide variety of athletes over the last 30 years. And today I'm going to go over that medial elbow, which can be referred to as little league elbow or golfer's elbow. Both can lead you to not doing your activities. So let's jump into the why. One of the big reasons that I've seen that people will struggle with medial elbow issues tends to be mechanical. Now, what do I mean by this? As the name describes, golfer's elbow and little league elbow. When you have problems with the elbow, I'm always looking at the shoulder or the mechanic. The two big reasons that I see that people will struggle with this part of their elbow is musculature, an imbalance front and back of the forearm. If you look at the images here, you can kind of see that there is an overdevelopment of one part. The gripping muscles will lead to a dysfunction when they start to get proportionally stronger than the extensors of the wrist that you'll see here in the diagram. And as we get an over-involvement of those muscles, you'll start to develop a real significant disproportion in the strength. And what we need to do is be able to address that a little bit later on that before, but that's part of the why. Now, additionally, the other thing that I see is poor mechanics and tightnesses. Let's take, for example, in lifting, if I see it often in people trying to do a back squat. Back squats require a significant amount. You see the image here. In strength and flexibility in the shoulder. So if you have trouble with reaching back and grabbing the bar, it's going to literally pull on that musculature here. But really, is that an elbow problem? No, it tends to be tightness in the shoulder that really manifests itself in the elbow. So we'll go over my favorite stretch to help that a little bit later. The other thing that I see often in the sports that I've worked with a lot, which people do, is tennis and golf. As we age, we start to change the sports that we play. And I see a lot of people playing tennis and having issues with that medial elbow, even though it's not tennis elbow, that traditionally that's that backhand issue on that lateral epicondylitis. You can get it as well from doing that. For reason why, as you see here in the mechanics, is because of that reach back and that rotation. Two things: rotational ability as well as shoulder flexibility to really address as the ball's coming up. And so the compensation is linked to the inability to reach back, and so you have to snap that elbow to get some speed. This is the same thing we see in little league elbow. Is young adults, when they're practicing pitching, they can't really reach back very effectively because their musculature is still developing. So if they want to throw heat, a lot of times it's not because the flexibility in the shoulder, they overcompensate by really extending the elbow hard, driving those bones in there and overusing those tendons there. Now, the other thing I see is also in golf. So if you look at the swing here, this is the top point of a really bad swing. You can kind of see that the same thing could be evident. If you don't have good rotation and you don't have good flexibility in the shoulder, you end up compensating through that elbow. Now, a little side note here, when we're talking about the meridians of the body, I like to dot every I and cross every T. Meridians of the body, a lot of times there's a liver point that comes in that medial part of the elbow. So if you're a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, they would tell you that that's a liver spot, and there could potentially also be an association with how you're dealing with stress. So make sure that you address that as well. So now let's jump into what actually practically works. Now with my clients, I always want to weave in their workouts and their rehab and prehab so they can avoid all this. And you can do, if you are starting to have some issues here, don't ignore them. Start to address them. First off, we're going to start off with flexion and extension of the wrists. In the video here, you'll see that I am focusing on just using an exercise ball, but you can use a bench or the floor. And we're working on stretching out the forearm flexors and the extensors. Long duration, low load is the secret to getting a response from the body. So I highly recommend you do 45 seconds to a minute when you do these stretches. And one of my favorite variations, the next stretch is a closed fist flexion. Now, this allows us to get deep into the muscles of the top of the forearm. Now, when we alluded earlier, the flexibility and the strength and the balance of the forearms is absolutely essential. And I find that most people will have some weakness and tightness in those top of the forearm muscles. And this is a great way to start activating them, wake them up before you start working them and make them stronger. Now, as we work into this, you notice that I mentioned that shoulder flexibility is a big problem if you're developing that medial elbow pain. Now, if you're a lifter and you come in here and you're doing a lot of tricep work and developing elbow tendonitis from that excessive pressing, that's a whole different video. Right here, we're dealing with the inside of the elbow. And a lot of that is due to the shoulder. One of my favorite movements here is the shoulder dislocate, so that we can start increasing the flexibility of the anterior deltoid, the pecs, and the pec minor. Going back and forth here nice and slow will take pressure off of the elbow when it comes time to your activity. One of my favorite stretches to do to help take care of my shoulders is a big brother stretch. Here, I take a jump stretch band, lock one arm into position behind the back, and then use the band and lock it in over my shoulder. This allows us to work some of the internal rotators. So if you're having trouble with squats, and that elbow pain, or you're having trouble with addressing the ball before you're hitting it in one of many sports, this is a great way to improve the flexibility of those areas. All right, last element here is the strength. For me, it really comes down to a couple basic things that I tend to do with all of my clients, male and female, just to make sure that they're maintaining strength. And one is a classic wrist roller. Now, you can do this light, you can do it supported. I always want to work the extensors, the top of the forearm here, and you'll see me rolling it away from my body and coming down in a nice controlled fashion. Keep the weight light, keep it under control, create a good burn in the top of the forearm, especially if you're having an imbalance. And how do you know that? Well, if you try this, you make one of these and you use 5 pounds and you're on fire when you're going up and down, you need some extra extensor strength to balance out the hands. One of the natural things that I tend to see with people that have overdeveloped grip, which, I'm in grappling sports, I've been lifting barbells, is their hands will naturally be in a curled position. Those muscles tend to be shortened. Those muscles are shortened in the forearm are going to predispose us to injuries in that medial elbow. And the last one here is a radial ulnar deviation, which is just a variation of forearm work, particularly hits the brachioradialis and brings up the strength there, which tends to balance out the forearm. All right, so that's it for today, guys. If you guys have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to this channel to send it out to as many people, because we want to be able to come up with simple, functional things that actually work.